Have you ever wondered why some people can lie about you, betray you, destroy your reputation, and sleep peacefully at night? Why they can mock your pain, celebrate your failures, and walk away untouched while you're left bleeding in the wreckage they created? What if I told you they're not untouched anymore? What if I told you that right now, at this very moment, the universe is collecting a debt they never saw coming? You didn't find this message by accident. This message found you. Heaven has been rolling tape on your life, and the divine court is finally in session. While you've been suffering in silence, thinking God forgot about you, something else has been happening behind the scenes. Something they never anticipated. Listen to me carefully, chosen one. You may think you've been abandoned. You may believe that your kindness was weakness, that your silence was surrender. But what if I told you that your silence has been your greatest weapon all along? What if every tear you cried in secret was being collected as evidence? What if every night you went to bed wondering, why me, God? Was actually God preparing something so devastating for your enemies that they're about to wish they had never even learned your name? There are some people walking this earth right now who are about to discover that touching a chosen one comes with a price they can't afford to pay. And the beautiful part? You didn't have to lift a finger. You just had to stay still and let heaven handle it. You are not just another person trying to survive this world. You are a quiet warrior, walking through fire, misunderstood and mocked, but never, ever abandoned. And those who thought they could break you without consequence, they're about to learn that karma isn't just coming. She's already arrived, and she's wearing your name on her assignment sheet. Before we dive deeper into this prophetic word, I want to thank every single one of you who has supported this message through super thanks. Your generosity means more than you know. You're not just donating, you're helping spread light to others who feel alone in their calling. Whether you give or not, I'm deeply grateful for your presence here, your support, your time, your attention. It all matters. And if this message is already resonating with your soul, go ahead and let heaven know you're ready. If you've ever been betrayed and kept silent, if you've ever wondered when justice would come, drop a 777 in the comments right now. This word is yours, because what I'm about to share with you will explain why your enemies can't sleep anymore. Why is it that the people who know you best are the ones who can wound you deepest? Why do those who've witnessed your heart, your sacrifices, your sleepless nights praying for them, why are they the very ones who turn their backs when you need them most? And why does their betrayal cut deeper than any stranger's cruelty ever could? Because they didn't just hurt you, they violated heaven itself. Listen to me, chosen one. What happened to you wasn't ordinary pain. It wasn't just life being difficult or relationships falling apart. What you experienced was spiritual sabotage, a calculated assault on your soul by people who knew exactly where to strike because you had trusted them with your vulnerabilities. You remember the moment, don't you? That phone call that never came, that invitation you weren't included in, that family gathering where suddenly you became the problem, that church leadership meeting where your decades of faithful service were dismissed with a wave of the hand. The adult children who stopped visiting, the grandchildren who became strangers, the lifelong friends who went silent when you needed them most. You sat there wondering what you had done wrong. You replayed every conversation, every interaction, searching for the moment you had failed them. But here's what the enemy doesn't want you to understand. You didn't fail them. They failed a divine test they didn't even know they were taking. Joseph knew this pain. Thrown into a pit by his own brothers, the very blood that should have protected him. They sat down to eat bread while he cried out from the darkness below. Genesis 37-24 tells us they cast him into the pit, and the pit was empty. There was no water in it. Empty, just like how you felt when they abandoned you. But Joseph's pit wasn't his punishment. It was his preparation. Jesus understood this agony, betrayed not by an enemy, but by Judas. Not with violence, but with a kiss. Matthew 26-49 records that intimate moment. And immediately he went up to Jesus and said, "Greetings, Rabbi," and kissed him. The very gesture of love became the weapon of betrayal. Just like how their familiarity with you became the knife they used to cut you down. You trusted them with your heart, didn't you? You believed that love was enough, that loyalty was mutual, that the years you invested, the sacrifices you made, the prayers you prayed in secret for their success would matter when your world started crumbling. But instead of catching you when you fell, they stepped over you and kept walking. This is what happens when sacred trust meets selfish ambition. When divine assignment collides with human jealousy. They couldn't stand watching you carry something they couldn't access. Your peace in the storm, your faith through the fire, your ability to forgive when they expected you to break. It reminded them of everything they weren't willing to become. David felt this devastation when he wrote Psalm 55:12-14. "For it is not an enemy who taunts me, then I could bear it. It is not an adversary who deals insolently with me, then I could hide from him. But it is you, a man, my equal, my companion, my familiar friend. We used to take sweet counsel together. Within God's house we walked in the throng." Sweet counsel. That's what you had with them, wasn't it? Those late-night conversations where you shared your dreams, your fears, your deepest longings. The prayers you prayed together. The tears you cried on each other's shoulders. The promises made in moments of vulnerability that they would always be there. Until they weren't. But here's what they didn't understand in their moment of betrayal. They weren't just abandoning you. They were rejecting the very grace that had been covering their lives through your presence. You were the intercessor they didn't see, the shield they didn't recognize, the favor they took for granted. When Job's friends came to comfort him in his suffering, they started well. Job 2:13 says they sat with him on the ground 7 days and 7 nights, and no one spoke a word to him, for they saw that his suffering was very great. But then they opened their mouths and became his accusers instead of his advocates. Sound familiar? The people who should have been your Job's comforters became your Job's critics. They turned your pain into your fault, your struggle into your failure, your silence into your weakness. But what they missed was that your suffering wasn't evidence of God's abandonment, it was proof of your election. They broke covenant with you, not just the spoken promises, but the unspoken understanding that comes with deep relationship. The sacred trust that says, "When the world turns against you, I will stand with you." Instead, when the world came for you, they handed it the ammunition. And in that moment of betrayal, something shifted in the spiritual realm. Angels took note. Heaven filed a report. The divine court opened a case file with their names on it, because touching the chosen without permission doesn't just anger the chosen, it triggers the wrath of the one who chose them. But you know what the most devastating part of their betrayal was? It wasn't the pain they caused, it was the potential they destroyed, the destiny they derailed, the calling they contaminated with their selfishness. They didn't just hurt your feelings, they interfered with God's plan. And that interference just activated something they never saw coming. Has someone ever mistaken your silence for weakness when you were actually choosing mercy over revenge? Tell me, chosen one, are you ready to discover what happens when heaven finally decides that mercy has run its course? Let me tell you something that will shake you to your core, chosen one. While you were lying awake at 3 a.m., wondering if God saw what they did to you, wondering if heaven was paying attention to your pain, the courtroom of heaven has been in session this entire time. And unlike earthly courts, this one has no jurors, just a judge and receipts. Every single thing they did to you was documented. Every lie they told about your character, every time they smiled in your face while plotting your downfall behind closed doors, every cruel word they whispered in group chats, thinking no one would ever know. Heaven was recording it all. You see, dear one, they made a fatal miscalculation. They thought they were just messing with another human being. They had no idea they were tampering with someone who carries the fingerprints of the Almighty on their soul. Scripture makes this crystal clear. Touch not my anointed ones, and do my prophets no harm. That's Psalm 105-15. Not a suggestion. A warning. But they didn't listen, did they? They thought your silence meant weakness. They mistook your grace for ignorance. They assumed your tears meant defeat. What they didn't realize is that every tear you cried was being collected in heaven's bottles. Job 13:23 tells us God keeps track of every tear. Not one drop of your pain went unnoticed. And now, the spiritual laws they thought they could break are breaking them instead. Have you noticed how their lives started unraveling right after they crossed you? How their peace turned to chaos the moment they walked away from your covering? It's not coincidence, beloved. It's cosmic justice. Because when you violate someone heaven has set apart, you don't just offend a person, you trigger divine consequences that no earthly lawyer can defend against. Scripture declares in Galatians 6-7, God is not mocked, for whatever a man sows, that he will also reap. They sowed betrayal into sacred ground. They planted seeds of cruelty in soil that was divinely protected. And now they're harvesting exactly what they planted, multiplied by the spiritual weight of who they chose to target. You want to know why they can't sleep at night anymore? Why their relationships are crumbling? Why doors that used to open for them are now slamming shut? It's because they didn't just hurt your feelings. They violated a spiritual contract they didn't even know existed. They broke heaven's law. And heaven's law always collects. Think about this. How many times did they mock your faith? How many times did they laugh at your prayers? How many times did they treat your kindness like stupidity? They thought they were winning. But what if I told you that every single act of cruelty against you was actually sealing their own fate? The same God who protected Daniel in the lion's den is the same God who's been watching over you. The same God who vindicated Job after his season of suffering is the same God who's about to vindicate you. The same God who elevated Joseph from the pit to the palace is the same God who's about to show the world what happens when you mess with his chosen. But here's what's really going to shock you, dear one. You didn't have to curse them. You didn't have to plot revenge. You didn't have to expose their lies or fight fire with fire. All you had to do was stay in position and let heaven handle the paperwork. Because divine justice doesn't need your help. It just needs your trust. Right now, as I'm speaking these words, there are people who wronged you, who are experiencing consequences they can't explain. Financial setbacks that make no sense. Relationships falling apart for no apparent reason. Health issues that doctors can't diagnose. Opportunities drying up like rivers in a drought. They're scratching their heads, wondering what's happening to their lives. Let me tell you what's happening. The universe is returning to sender. Every ounce of pain they sent your way is circling back like a boomerang, carrying compound interest. They thought they were throwing stones at you, but they were actually building their own prison walls. And the most beautiful part, you're not even thinking about them anymore. While they're drowning in the chaos they created, you're walking in a peace they can't touch, a joy they can't steal, and a favor they can't block. Because when heaven vindicates you, it doesn't just restore what was taken, it multiplies what was meant for your good. They're learning the hard way that there's a difference between ordinary people and God's chosen ones. Ordinary people you can mistreat and walk away. But the chosen come with a warranty from heaven itself. And that warranty just got activated. So I'm asking you right now, can you feel it? Can you sense the shift in the spiritual atmosphere? The same people who once ignored your calls are now watching your every move. The same voices that once mocked your dreams are now silent with shock at your elevation. The same hands that once pushed you down are now shaking with the realization of what they've done. Drop "It's returning to sender" in the chat if you believe God is handling it His way. Because what's about to happen next will prove that your vindication was never a question of if, only when. And that when is happening right now, chosen one. Let me tell you something about spiritual law that will shake you to your core. What they did to you wasn't just mean. It wasn't just cruel. It was a violation of cosmic order. And when you violate spiritual law, the universe doesn't just notice, it responds with mathematical precision. You see, they thought they were playing checkers, but heaven was playing chess, and every move they made against you was recorded in a courtroom they never knew existed. Listen carefully. Exodus 20:5 tells us that the consequences of sin are visited upon the children unto the third and fourth generation. That's not just ancient text, dear one. That's spiritual DNA. When they touched you with malicious intent, they didn't just harm a person. They signed their bloodline up for a debt that compounds with interest across generations. They planted thorns in your garden and are shocked they're bleeding. They spoke curses into the wind and wonder why the storm is permanently parked over their life. They threw stones at heaven's chosen and can't understand why their own roof is collapsing. But here's what they never understood. You weren't just another target. You were a divine mirror. Every cruel word they spoke to you was actually a prophecy they were pronouncing over themselves. Every trap they set for you became the very pit they would fall into. Psalm 7:15 declares, "He made a pit and dug it out, and has fallen into the ditch which he made." Think about this for a moment. How many times did they mock your struggles? How many nights did they sleep peacefully while you cried yourself to exhaustion? They thought your tears were weakness. But what if I told you those tears were evidence being collected in heaven's courtroom? They lied, they laughed, they walked away, but heaven never did. See, here's what makes spiritual law different from human justice. Human courts can be bought, judges can be influenced, evidence can be destroyed. But the divine court operates on a frequency that transcends time and space. Every whispered lie, every calculated betrayal, every moment they chose cruelty over compassion, it's all been recorded in a realm where nothing can be deleted, nothing can be buried, and nothing expires. Look at history, chosen one. Look at the pattern. Harvey Weinstein thought his power made him untouchable for decades, but spiritual law was building a case that would eventually expose him on the world stage. Bill Cosby believed his reputation would shield him forever. But the universe had other plans. These aren't accidents. This is divine justice moving at heaven's pace. And you want to know something that will give you chills? The very people who hurt you are starting to feel it. That restlessness they can't explain, that anxiety that follows them from room to room, that sense that something is hunting them. They dismiss it as stress, but you and I know better. That's not stress, beloved. That's spiritual consequences knocking at their door. Romans 12:19 promises us, "Vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord." Notice it doesn't say might repay or could repay. It says will repay. That's not a suggestion. That's a spiritual guarantee backed by the full authority of heaven. But here's where it gets even deeper. They thought hurting you was a one-time event. They assumed that once they walked away, it was over. But spiritual law doesn't work that way. What they started with you doesn't end until divine justice is satisfied. And divine justice isn't satisfied with apologies. It demands complete restoration. Remember Job? The enemy thought destroying his life would break his faith. But when the dust settled, Job 42:10 tells us, the Lord gave Job twice as much as he had before. Twice as much. That's not just restoration, beloved. That's divine multiplication for pain endured. Your enemies thought they were writing your ending, but what they actually did was trigger your double portion season. Every dollar they cost you is coming back multiplied. Every tear they caused is being turned into a river of blessing. Every door they slammed is being replaced with gates they can never close. And the beautiful part? They can see it happening. They're watching your life transform while theirs crumbles. They're witnessing your peace while their world burns with the very fire they tried to consume you with. This isn't revenge, chosen one. This is spiritual mathematics. Galatians 6-7 warns us, "Be not deceived. God is not mocked. For whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap." they sowed betrayal. They're reaping isolation. They sowed cruelty. They're reaping chaos. They sowed lies. They're reaping exposure. The price was always going to come due. The only question was when. If this is your moment of confirmation, if you can feel the shift happening right now in your spirit, pause and comment, "Heaven saw it all," because heaven did see it all. And heaven is responding with the kind of justice that makes empires tremble and kingdoms fall. But this is just the beginning of what God is doing in your life. Because while your enemies are learning about consequences, you're about to discover what it means to be divinely vindicated, and that revelation will change everything you thought you knew about your destiny. You could have fought back. You could have exposed every lie they told about you. You could have dragged their secrets into the light and watched their reputation crumble in real time, but you didn't. And they called that weakness, didn't they? They laughed at your silence. They mistook your mercy for fear. They thought your restraint meant you had nothing to fight with. But chosen one, what they witnessed wasn't weakness. It was warfare on a level they couldn't even comprehend. You see, there's a difference between those who fight and those who let God fight for them. There's a difference between human retaliation and divine justice. And you, dear warrior, you understood something sacred that your enemies never could grasp. You understood that some battles aren't meant for human hands. Exodus 14:14 tells us, "The Lord will fight for you. You only need to be still, not silent because you're scared, still because you're spiritually intelligent." You knew that if you unleashed your full power, if you struck back with everything you had, it wouldn't just be payback, it would be overkill. And somewhere deep in your spirit, you understood that wasn't your assignment. Your assignment was to hold the line, to remain pure while they contaminated themselves, to stay clean while they rolled around in their own filth. Think about Princess Diana. The world watched as she was publicly humiliated, betrayed by the very institution she served. The tabloids tore her apart daily. The royal family treated her like a disposable ornament. She could have burned it all down. She had the ammunition, she knew the secrets, but instead she chose grace. She chose to use her pain as a platform for healing others. And today, decades after her death, her legacy shines brighter than those who tried to dim her light. Why? Because she let God handle the fight. Consider Nelson Mandela. 27 years in prison. 27 years of his life stolen by hatred and injustice. When he finally walked free, the world expected him to emerge with fire in his eyes, ready to burn down everything that had caged him. Instead, he emerged with forgiveness on his lips and reconciliation in his heart, not because he was weak, but because he understood that revenge would have made him just like his oppressors. He let God handle the fight, and his restraint changed a nation. And what about Chadwick Boseman? While he was battling cancer in secret, the world criticized his appearance. People joked about his weight loss, mocked his energy levels, questioned his commitment. He could have revealed his struggle, could have silenced every critic with the truth of his suffering. But he chose to carry his cross in silence, to use his final breaths to inspire others, rather than shame his detractors. When the truth finally came out, those same mockers were drowning in their own guilt. His holy restraint became a mirror that exposed their cruelty. You held back, chosen one, not because you couldn't strike, but because you knew God would. And his strike would be surgical, precise, devastating in ways your human hands never could achieve. But let's get real for a moment. I know there were nights you lay awake wondering if your silence was foolishness. I know there were moments you questioned whether God was really paying attention, when they were out there spreading lies about you, when they were twisting your words, when they were painting you as the villain in a story where you were clearly the victim. Didn't you wonder if maybe you should have fought back? Here's what you need to understand. Your restraint wasn't just personal discipline, it was prophetic posture. Every time you chose not to retaliate, you were creating space for divine intervention. Every time you bit your tongue, instead of speaking their secrets, You were preserving your own integrity. Every time you walked away instead of walking toward the fight, you were positioning yourself for a blessing they couldn't block. Your patience wasn't passive, it was powerful. It was the kind of strength that builds kingdoms, not just wins arguments. And now look around you. Look at their lives, look at the chaos they're drowning in. Look at how their own actions have become their prison. You didn't have to curse them, you didn't have to plot against them. You just had to step out of the way and let God's justice flow. They thought your silence meant surrender, but your silence was actually the calm before their storm. They thought your restraint meant you had no weapons, but your restraint was the weapon. It was the spiritual discipline that activated heaven's response on your behalf. The question isn't why you didn't fight back. The question is, how did you know not to? How did your spirit recognize that this battle belonged to the Lord? How did you have the wisdom to understand that some victories can only come through surrender? Because that's what separates the chosen from the common. The chosen understand that there's a time to fight and a time to be still. There's a time to speak and a time to let your life do the talking. There's a time to defend yourself and a time to let God be your defense. Your holy restraint has become their unholy reckoning, and now they're learning the hard way that when you mess with someone who walks in divine favor, you're not just picking a fight with a person. You're picking a fight with the God who covers them. If you ever chose stillness over screaming, if you ever bit your tongue when you could have bitten back, if you ever walked away when you could have walked through them, drop in the comments, "God fought for me." Let hell know that your restraint wasn't retreat. It was warfare on a level they'll never understand. Because chosen one, your greatest victory wasn't winning the fight. It was refusing to fight dirty while God fought clean on your behalf. But here's where the story takes a turn that nobody saw coming. Not your enemies, not your critics, and maybe not even you. You've been sitting in that valley long enough, chosen one. You've been carrying their words like stones in your pockets, replaying their betrayals like broken records in your mind. But what if I told you that every single tear you've shed has been watering the ground for something magnificent? What if every sleepless night has been preparation for a dawn so bright it will blind those who tried to bury you? The joke's over. You're rising now. Listen to me carefully. Psalm 23:5 says, "You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies." Do you understand what that means? God doesn't just rescue you from your enemies. He levates you in front of them. He makes them watch your comeback. He forces them to witness your restoration while they're still drowning in the consequences of what they did to you. This isn't just healing, dear one. This is vindication with a front row seat. Right now, as I speak these words, there are people who laughed at your pain who can't laugh anymore. There are people who celebrated your downfall who are now watching their own world crumble. There are people who thought they buried you, who are about to discover you weren't buried at all. You were planted. And the harvest is here. You want to know why they're suddenly reaching out? Why they're sending those awkward text messages, those half-hearted apologies, those "I've been thinking about you" calls? It's not because they miss you. It's because they can feel the shift in the atmosphere. They can sense that something has changed. They can feel your elevation coming like a storm on the horizon, and they're terrified of being left behind. But they should be terrified. Because this is your comeback season. Not because they apologized. Most of them haven't even done that properly. Not because they suddenly recognized your worth. They're still too proud for that. This is your comeback season because heaven approved the next level. Let me tell you about Tyler Perry. Homeless, sleeping in his car, writing plays that nobody wanted to see. People laughed at him, producers rejected him, critics dismissed him as a joke. But Tyler kept writing, kept believing, kept pushing forward when every logical voice said quit. Today, he owns a 330-acre studio in Atlanta. He employs hundreds of people. He's worth over $1 billion. And every single person who rejected him now has to live with the fact that they walked away from greatness. Steve Harvey was 37 years old, living out of his car, doing comedy gigs for $50 a night. His wife left him. His kids barely knew him. People said he was too old, too unknown, too broke to make it in Hollywood. But Steve didn't just make it, he conquered it. Multiple television shows, best-selling books, massive real estate empire. The same industry that rejected him now pays him millions just to show up. These weren't accidents, chosen one. These were divine appointments with destiny. And here's what I need you to understand with every fiber of your being. You are next. The same God who lifted Tyler from that car to that studio is the same God working in your life right now. The same divine force that turned Steve's rejection into resurrection is the same force that's been moving behind the scenes while you thought you were forgotten. But here's the difference between you and everybody else who's been hurt, betrayed, and counted out. You understand something they don't. You know that your comeback isn't just personal, it's prophetic. It's not just about you getting back what you lost. It's about God proving that when you mess with His chosen ones, you mess with Him. Isaiah 54:17 declares, "No weapon formed against you shall prosper, and every tongue which rises against you in judgment you shall condemn." That's not a suggestion. That's not a hope. That's a divine guarantee. And it's being fulfilled in your life right now. Do you feel that stirring in your spirit? That's not anxiety. That's anticipation. That's your soul recognizing that the season is shifting, the tables are turning, the script is flipping, and you're about to step into a dimension of favor that will make your enemies wish they had never even learned your name. This moment, right here, right now, this is when everything changes. This is when you stop being the victim of their story and start being the author of your own. This is when you realize that their rejection wasn't your disqualification, it was your preparation. You've been in the wilderness long enough. You've been in the valley long enough. You've been silent long enough. But God is saying, enough. The same voice that called Lazarus out of the tomb is calling you out of your season of sorrow. The same power that parted the Red Sea is parting the obstacles in your path. The same God who turned water into wine is about to turn your pain into purpose, your mess into your message, your breakdown into your breakthrough. Say it out loud, type it in the comments, claim it with your whole heart. I'm rising. Right now. Because while they thought they were writing your obituary, God was writing your comeback story. And the first chapter starts today. But what happens when your enemies realize they didn't just attack a person, they attacked a divine assignment? Listen to me, chosen one. Right now, while I'm speaking these words, there are people sitting in rooms they once felt comfortable in, and something has changed. The air feels different. The peace they once knew has evaporated, and they can't figure out why. But you know why. They're finally feeling the weight of what they lost when they decided you were disposable. They didn't just lose a relationship when they walked away from you. They lost access to favor. They lost their covering. They lost their connection to the divine flow that was moving through your life and spilling over into theirs. You see, for years, maybe decades, you were their secret weapon, and they never even knew it. While they were laughing at your struggles, mocking your faith, dismissing your dreams, something supernatural was happening. Your prayers were covering them. Your favor was protecting them. Your anointing was opening doors they thought they opened themselves. But now the covering has been removed. Think about this carefully. How many times did their lives mysteriously improve when you were around? How many storms passed them by while you were praying? How many opportunities fell into their laps while your hands were lifted in intercession? They called it luck. They called it their hard work. They called it everything except what it actually was. The blessing of God flowing through a chosen vessel who loved them enough to stand in the gap. Proverbs 10:22 tells us, "The blessing of the Lord brings wealth and adds no sorrow to it." But here's what they never understood. Sometimes that blessing flows through people. And when you remove yourself from toxic relationships, you don't just take your peace, you take the blessing with you. They thought you were the problem. They thought your sensitivity was weakness. They thought your tears were drama. But you weren't the storm in their life. You were their shelter from it. And now that shelter is gone. Do you remember how they used to treat you when they needed something? How quickly they'd call when their world was falling apart? How fast they'd humble themselves when they needed your prayers, your wisdom, your strength? But the moment the crisis passed, the moment the storm cleared, they'd go back to treating you like you were nothing. They didn't realize they were playing with fire. They didn't understand they were rejecting the very source of their protection. And now they're feeling what life looks like without divine covering. Their relationships are crumbling. Their finances are unstable. Their peace has turned to anxiety. Their confidence has become confusion. And deep in their spirit, they know something has shifted. They can feel it in their bones. The favor has left the building. But look at you now. Look at how you're walking. Look at how you're talking. Look at the opportunities that are flowing to you like rivers in the desert. Look at the peace that surpasses understanding that's settled over your life. Look at the favor that's following you wherever you go. You weren't broken by what they did to you. You were being repositioned. Every door they slammed in your face was God redirecting you to a better door. Every relationship they destroyed was God removing people who were blocking your elevation. Every time they left you standing alone, God was teaching you to stand in your own power. They thought they were punishing you, but they were actually promoting you. And here's the part that's driving them crazy. You're untouchable now. Not because you're arrogant, but because you're anointed. Not because you're bitter, but because you're blessed. Not because you're seeking revenge, but because you're walking in divine favor that they can no longer access. They can't reach you anymore. They can't manipulate you anymore. They can't drain you anymore. The phone number to your favor has been disconnected, and there's no forwarding address. You know what's beautiful about this season you're entering? You don't have to prove anything to anyone anymore. You don't have to explain your worth. You don't have to justify your value. You don't have to beg for respect or fight for recognition. Your life is now speaking so loudly that you don't need to say a word. They're watching from a distance, seeing doors open for you that they can't even see. They're watching opportunities flow to you that they can't even touch. They're watching you walk in peace while their world is falling apart. And they're finally understanding what they lost. But here's what they don't understand yet. This isn't just about you rising. This is about you becoming who God always intended you to be. You weren't created to be their security blanket. You weren't designed to be their emergency contact with heaven. You weren't born to be their spiritual life support system. You were created to be a light in this world. And lights aren't meant to be hidden under the dysfunction of people who can't appreciate their glow. They laughed when you fell, but they can't reach you now. They celebrated your pain, but they can't touch your peace. They thought they won when they walked away, but they lost everything when they lost you. And the most powerful part of all this? You never had to fight back. You never had to seek revenge. You just had to trust God's timing and watch Him reposition you for His glory. But this untouchable season you're entering, it comes with a responsibility. Because now that you know who you are, now that you understand your value, now that you've experienced God's faithfulness in the darkness, what are you going to do with this revelation? This wasn't about revenge, it was about revelation. Chosen one, I need you to stop for a moment and really hear what I'm about to tell you. Because everything you thought you knew about your suffering is about to be turned upside down. You've been walking around thinking you were the victim in this story. You've been carrying the weight of betrayal, wondering why God allowed such cruelty to touch your life. You've questioned His love, His timing, His very existence during those 3 a.m. moments when the pain felt unbearable. But what if I told you that you were never the victim? What if every wound, every sleepless night, every tear that fell in silence was actually God preparing you for something so magnificent that your enemies would tremble at the very mention of your name? Listen to me carefully. Romans 8:18 declares, I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us. Not to us, dear one, in us. The glory isn't coming from the outside. It's been growing inside you through every trial, every betrayal, every moment you wanted to quit but didn't. You think they broke you, but they actually built you. Every cruel word was a chisel in the master's hand, carving away everything that wasn't essential to your destiny. Every rejection was heaven redirecting you from relationships that would have limited your assignment. Every closed door was God protecting you from places that couldn't contain the magnitude of what He was preparing you to carry. Do you understand what's happening here? You weren't being punished, you were being positioned. Think about Joseph, thrown into a pit by his own brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, forgotten in prison. But Genesis 50:20 reveals the truth. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. Joseph didn't survive his trials. He was transformed by them. And that transformation didn't just change his life, it saved an entire nation from famine. Your pain wasn't random, chosen one. It was strategic. Heaven was forging you into a weapon of deliverance for people you haven't even met yet. But here's where it gets deeper. Your enemies thought they were writing your obituary, but they were actually writing your resume. Every lie they told became evidence of their character. Every scheme they plotted became documentation of their spiritual bankruptcy. While they were busy trying to destroy you, they were unknowingly building the very platform from which your testimony would echo across generations. You see, this was never about revenge. Revenge is human. This was about revelation. Divine revelation of who you really are, what you carry, and why hell itself mobilized against you. You're not just someone who survived trauma. You are a walking sanctuary, a testimony in motion, a living demonstration that when God says, "It is finished," He means it. Your scars aren't marks of defeat. They're medals of honor from battles fought on behalf of people who will never know your name, but will benefit from your victory. But here's what's about to shake you to your core. The very people who celebrated your downfall are now experiencing their own. Not because you cursed them, you've been too busy healing to harbor hatred. Not because you sought revenge, you've been too focused on your assignment to waste energy on their destruction. No, dear one, what's happening to them is the natural consequence of violating spiritual law. Galatians 6-7 warns us, "Do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. A man reaps what he sows." They sowed cruelty into sacred ground. They mocked what heaven held precious. They touched the anointed and thought there would be no consequences. They were wrong. Right now, as I speak these words, divine justice is moving through their lives like a spiritual audit. Every whispered lie is echoing back to them amplified. Every wound they inflicted is returning to them multiplied. Every door they tried to close on you is slamming shut on them. And the most beautiful part? You don't have to watch their downfall to feel vindicated. You're too busy rising to look back at their falling. But this isn't the end of your story, beloved. This is just the end of the preparation phase. Everything you've endured has been heaven's graduate school, and you've just received your diploma. The question is, are you ready for your assignment? Because there are people in this world right now who are going through exactly what you went through. They're crying the same tears, asking the same questions, feeling the same abandonment. And God needs someone who's been through the fire to go back and lead others out. You think your testimony is about survival, but it's actually about salvation. Not just your own, but the salvation of every soul who will hear your story and realize that if God brought you through, He can bring them through too. Isaiah 61:3 says, "He gives us beauty for ashes, the oil of joy for mourning, the garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness." But notice, He doesn't just give you beauty for your ashes. He transforms you into someone who can create beauty from the ashes of others. This is your divine assignment, chosen one. Not just to overcome, but to become an overcomer who shows others the way. Not just to survive, but to thrive in such a way that your very existence becomes a threat to every lie the enemy has ever told about God's faithfulness. So the question that will determine everything that happens next is this: Will you step into the assignment that your pain has prepared you for? Or will you waste your wilderness experience by keeping your victory to yourself? They thought you were gone, but you were just being repositioned. They celebrated your silence, didn't they? When you stopped fighting back, when you stopped defending yourself, when you simply disappeared from their drama, they threw a party. They thought they had finally broken the one person who couldn't be bought, couldn't be manipulated, couldn't be controlled. But what they didn't realize, chosen one, is that you didn't disappear. You were being rearranged by divine hands in silence. While they were laughing at your absence, God was orchestrating your return. While they thought they had buried you under their lies and betrayal, heaven was actually burying them under the weight of divine justice. What looked like your defeat was actually your strategic repositioning. You see, there's something powerful that happens when a chosen one goes quiet. The world mistakes it for surrender. Your enemies mistake it for victory. But heaven recognizes it as preparation. Think about Jesus himself. After his baptism, after the heavens opened and God declared, "This is my beloved Son," what happened next? The Spirit led him into the wilderness for 40 days, 40 days of silence, 40 days where his enemies thought he was finished before he even started. But Luke 4:14 tells us the truth. Jesus returned in the power of the Spirit. He didn't come back the same. He came back empowered. And that's exactly what's been happening to you. You didn't run away from the battlefield, dear one. You went into the war room with the Almighty. While they were busy celebrating what they thought was your destruction, you were being reconstructed by the Master Builder himself. Every tear you cried in secret became a blueprint for your comeback. Every night you questioned God became a night. He was answering prayers you didn't even know how to pray. But here's what's going to shock them. Here's what's going to make their blood run cold when they see you again. You're not coming back bitter. You're not coming back broken. You're not even coming back angry. You're coming back anointed. Isaiah 60:1 declares, "Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord rises upon you." This isn't just a nice scripture, chosen one. This is your divine activation code. This is heaven's way of saying, the intermission is over. It's time for Act 2. And Act 2? That's where the real story begins. What they buried, God was building. What they dismissed, heaven was developing. While they were busy trying to erase your name from every conversation, God was writing it in the book of life with permanent ink. While they thought they were ending your story, the author of life was just turning the page to the chapter that would leave them speechless. You know what terrifies them most? It's not your anger. Angry people are predictable. Angry people can be manipulated. What terrifies them is your peace. What haunts their dreams is your joy. What makes their hands shake is the fact that after everything they put you through, you're still standing, still glowing, still chosen. Because here's a truth they never understood. You can't kill what God has ordained. You can't bury what heaven has blessed. You can't silence what the Spirit has sanctified. They thought your absence meant you had given up, but your absence was actually God saying, "Stand back and watch what I do when my chosen one stops trying to fight their own battles and lets me handle it." And now they're about to see exactly what that looks like. Every door they slammed in your face, God has been building you a mansion with doors they'll never be able to close. Every lie they told about you, God has been writing truth so bright it will blind their deception. Every person they turned against you, God has been positioning people in your corner who carry more influence than they ever dreamed of having. You see, when you're chosen, your setback isn't a setback, it's a setup. Your retreat isn't defeat, it's divine strategy. Your silence isn't weakness. It's the calm before the storm that's about to change everything. And that storm, beloved, is you walking back into their world, not as the person they broke, but as the warrior God rebuilt. But here's the question that's going to determine everything. Are you ready to stop hiding and start shining? Are you ready to step out of the shadows they've forced you into and walk into the spotlight God has been preparing for you. Because the world is about to witness something they've never seen before. They're about to watch someone rise from the ashes, not with vengeance, but with victory. Not with hatred, but with holiness. Not seeking revenge, but walking in divine favor so thick that even their curses will turn into blessings. The repositioning is complete, chosen one. The reconstruction is finished. The time for hiding is over. What happens next will either be your greatest testimony or your greatest regret. The choice is yours, but the stage is set, the lights are on, and heaven is holding its breath, waiting for your entrance. Are you ready to show them what happens when God's chosen one stops playing defense and starts walking in divine authority? Because ready or not, your moment has arrived. Zamanama, different oil, chosen one. They're staring at you now with confusion in their eyes. The same people who counted you out, who whispered behind your back, who celebrated when you walked away broken and bleeding. They're looking at you like they're seeing a ghost. But you're not a ghost. You're a resurrection. When Moses came down from Mount Sinai after 40 days in the presence of the Almighty, the Bible tells us his face was so radiant that the Israelites couldn't even look at him. Exodus 34:30 says they were afraid to come near him because the skin of his face shone. But here's what they didn't understand then, and here's what your enemies don't understand now. That glow wasn't makeup. That radiance wasn't acting. It was the unmistakable mark of someone who had been in the presence of the Most High God. You've been on your own mountain, haven't you? Not a physical mountain, but a spiritual wilderness where you were stripped of everything familiar, everything comfortable, everything you thought defined you. They thought they were watching your funeral. They had no idea they were witnessing your metamorphosis. You don't fight the same anymore. You don't move the same. You don't beg for their approval, chase their validation, or break yourself trying to fit into spaces that were never designed for your expansion. Because the oil changed everything. Let me tell you what's really happening here. In 1 Samuel 16, the prophet Samuel came to anoint the next king of Israel. Jesse lined up all his sons, the impressive ones, the obvious choices, the ones who looked the part, but God rejected every single one of them. Then Samuel asked, "Are these all the sons you have?" And Jesse, almost embarrassed, said, "Well, there's the youngest, but he's out in the fields tending sheep." David, the overlooked one, the forgotten one, the one his own father didn't think was worth calling in from the pasture. But when Samuel poured that oil on David's head, something shifted in the spiritual realm. The Bible says, "From that day on, the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon David." Do you hear what I'm telling you? You were anointed in the presence of people who overlooked you. Your breakthrough happened right in front of those who counted you out. And now they're watching a version of you they can't explain or control. They wanted to erase you. They plotted your downfall, celebrated your struggles, and assumed your silence meant surrender. But what they didn't know is that while they were busy planning your destruction, heaven was planning your restoration. While they were writing your obituary, God was writing your comeback story. You don't fight the same because you're not fighting from defeat anymore. You're fighting from victory. You don't move the same because you're not moving in your own strength anymore. You're moving in divine authority. You don't need their approval because you've already been approved by the highest court in the universe. This isn't just confidence. This is consecration. This isn't just self-improvement. This is spiritual transformation. The oil that was poured over your life in that secret place, in that valley of weeping, in that season when you thought God had forgotten your address, that oil has changed your entire frequency. Look at them now. The same people who used to dismiss you with a wave of their hand are now studying your every move. They're trying to figure out what happened to you. They're analyzing your words, dissecting your decisions, wondering how someone they wrote off is now writing the narrative. You used to ask for a seat at their table. Now they're begging for an invitation to yours. You used to chase their friendship. Now they're chasing your attention. You used to wonder if you were good enough for their circle. Now they're wondering if they're worthy of your presence. But here's the part that's driving them crazy. You're not arrogant. You're not bitter. You're not trying to prove anything or get revenge. You're just different. There's a peace about you that doesn't make sense given what you've been through. There's an authority in your voice that wasn't there before. There's a light in your eyes that seems to come from somewhere beyond this world. That's because it does. When you've been anointed by God Himself, when you've been kissed by divine favor, when you've been marked for a purpose bigger than your pain, everything about you changes. Your posture changes. Your priorities change. Your power changes. The same mouth that used to beg now declares. The same hands that used to reach out desperately now extend blessing. The same heart that used to break now breaks generational curses. Same name, different oil. They thought they were dealing with the old you. The you that would tolerate disrespect, accept crumbs, and settle for leftovers. But that version of you died in the wilderness. What came back is someone they never met before. Someone anointed, someone appointed, someone absolutely unstoppable. And the most beautiful part? You didn't have to announce your transformation. You didn't have to post about your progress or prove your worth. Your presence speaks for itself. Your peace is your power. Your silence is your strength. So when they look at you with those confused expressions, when they try to reconcile the person they thought they destroyed with the person standing before them now, just smile. Because they're not just looking at your comeback. They're looking at what happens when heaven decides to vindicate someone who refused to take revenge into their own hands. But this transformation, this anointing, this divine repositioning comes with a responsibility that will shake everything they thought they knew about power. So you thought the elevation would be smooth, didn't you? You thought when God finally lifted you up, everyone would clap, everyone would celebrate, everyone would say, "It's about time." But let me tell you something that might shock you to your core. The higher God raises you, the louder hell gets. The brighter your light shines, the more the darkness starts hissing. You're rising, chosen one, and that's exactly why they're losing their minds. Every time God raises a voice, the enemy raises volume. Every time heaven opens a door for you, the pit sends reinforcements. You weren't crowned to be comfortable. You weren't anointed to be popular. You were crowned to be strategic disruption in a world that's been sleeping in spiritual mediocrity for far too long. Listen to me carefully. The higher the oil flows on your head, the more the serpents get restless beneath your feet. That promotion you just received, they're talking about it in rooms you've never entered. That peace you're finally walking in, it's driving your enemies absolutely insane. That breakthrough that just manifested in your life, it's causing panic attacks in people who thought they had successfully buried you. And you want to know why? Because your elevation exposes their stagnation. Your breakthrough reveals their spiritual bankruptcy. Your peace highlights their chaos. You didn't just rise, beloved. You became a walking indictment against everyone who chose to stay low when God called them higher. Think about David. The moment Samuel poured that oil on his head, Saul couldn't sleep anymore. Not because David did anything wrong, but because the anointing on David's life made Saul's rebellion obvious. The boy with the slingshot became the man with the kingdom, and suddenly everyone who doubted him was scrambling to explain how they missed God so completely. But here's what they don't understand about your story. You weren't anointed to make them comfortable. You were anointed to make them choose. Light always does that. It forces people to decide whether they're going to step into it or hide from it. And most people, unfortunately, choose to hide. That's why they can't celebrate your victories. That's why your breakthrough makes them bitter instead of blessed. That's why they'd rather see you fail than watch you fly. Because your success reminds them of their surrender. Your faith reminds them of their fear. Your persistence reminds them of all the times they quit when God was just about to show up. The psalmist understood this warfare when he wrote, "You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies," not despite your enemies, in their presence. God doesn't remove your haters, He promotes you in front of them. He doesn't silence your critics, He makes them watch you succeed. He doesn't hide your blessings, he puts them on display for everyone who said you'd never make it. But let me tell you what's really happening in the spiritual realm while they're whispering and plotting. Every word they speak against your destiny is being recorded. Every scheme they devise is being documented. Every trap they set is being turned into a testimony. Because when you touch God's anointed, you don't just offend a person, you offend the one who sent them. I've watched this pattern for 50 years of ministry. Every time God raises up a chosen vessel, the enemy sends his best soldiers. But here's what the devil never calculated. The very resistance meant to stop you is actually confirming your calling. The warfare isn't evidence that you're walking in error. It's proof that you're walking in power. You see, comfortable Christianity never threatens hell. Average faith never disrupts darkness. But when God marks someone for greatness, when he begins to pour out his Spirit in supernatural measure, that's when the real battle begins. Because the enemy knows something about your future that even you might not fully understand yet. That's why your family turned cold when you started seeking God seriously. That's why old friends disappeared when you began walking in purpose. That's why opportunities started drying up when you refused to compromise your convictions. The enemy was trying to abort your assignment before it fully manifested. But guess what? He's too late. You're already walking in it. The very fact that you're still standing, still believing, still pressing forward despite everything hell has thrown at you, is proof that greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world. They won't congratulate your glow, beloved. They can't celebrate what convicts them. But heaven is still calling you forward. The Father is still saying, "Well done." The angels are still cheering your progress. And the saints who've gone before are still praying for your perseverance. Don't you dare dim your light to make their darkness comfortable. Don't you dare shrink your calling to fit their limitations. Don't you dare apologize for the favor God has placed on your life just because it makes insecure people nervous. The crown comes with war, but it also comes with authority. The anointing attracts opposition, but it also attracts angels. The elevation brings enemies, but it also brings empowerment beyond anything you've ever experienced. So when they start acting strange around you, when they begin to distance themselves, when they suddenly have opinions about your every move, don't be surprised, don't be discouraged. And whatever you do, don't be deterred. Because what they're really telling you is this: you're becoming everything they were afraid you'd become. You're walking into everything they said you'd never reach. You're manifesting everything they hoped would remain hidden. And that, chosen one, is exactly where God needs you to be. Because the world doesn't need another person trying to fit in. It needs someone bold enough to stand out. It needs someone anointed enough to stand up. It needs someone chosen enough to stand firm when the war gets real. But here's the question that will determine everything about your next season. Will you keep rising, or will you start shrinking back when the heat gets turned up? Listen to me, chosen one. Do you remember that door? The one that slammed so hard in your face it echoed through your soul for months. The job that said you weren't qualified. The relationship that said you weren't enough. The family member who said you'd never amount to anything. The friend who chose everyone else over you. The church that made you feel invisible. The business that refused your loan. The opportunity that laughed at your dream. They locked that door thinking it would contain you, not knowing God was building you an entire palace on the other side. Right now, at this very moment, those same people who shut you out are pressing their faces against the glass, watching you walk through doors they never even knew existed. And the beautiful irony? They're still standing behind the same doors they used to reject you, but now those doors have become their prison. You see, what they didn't understand is that when you reject a chosen one, you don't just lose access to that person, you lose access to the favor that was covering them. You lose access to the blessing that was flowing through them. You lose access to the very grace that was keeping your own doors open. They blocked you. You built. They laughed. You listened. They watched. Now they witness. But here's what's really happening behind those closed doors right now. They can't sleep. Their minds are racing. Because somewhere deep in their spirit, they're starting to realize they didn't just reject a person, they rejected a divine assignment. They didn't just close a door on you. They closed a door on their own destiny. Remember Pharaoh? He thought he was powerful enough to reject Moses and the children of Israel. He thought he could keep God's people in bondage forever. But what he didn't realize is that every time he said no to Moses, he was saying no to God himself. And when God finally moved, Pharaoh didn't just lose his slaves. He lost his army. He lost his firstborn. He lost everything that made him feel untouchable. That's what's happening right now to everyone who thought they could discard you without consequence. The CEO who overlooked your resume? His company is hemorrhaging talent and he can't figure out why. The friend who ghosted you when you needed them most. They're drowning in loneliness, wondering why every new relationship feels empty. The family member who said, "You'd never succeed." They're watching your success from a distance, choking on their own words. In Revelation 3-7, Jesus declares, "These are the words of him who is holy and true, who holds the key of David. What he opens, no one can shut, and what he shuts, no one can open." Did you catch that? What he opens, no one can shut. Not your boss, not your ex, not your critics, not your enemies. When God decides it's time for your door to open, every lock breaks, every barrier crumbles, every wall comes down. But here's the part that's going to blow your mind. The doors that are opening for you now, they're not just bigger than the ones that rejected you. They're doors your enemies don't even have the spiritual clearance to see, let alone walk through. You thought you were being rejected, but you were being redirected. You thought you were being overlooked, but you were being elevated to a level they could never reach. You thought you were losing opportunities, but God was saving you from limitations. And now, chosen one, you're walking through doors that require a different kind of key, not the key of human approval, not the key of worldly qualifications, but the key of divine favor. The key of spiritual authority, the key that only the chosen ones carry. They're watching you from behind their glass walls, pressing their faces against windows they can't break, wondering how you got access to rooms they've been trying to enter their whole lives. And the truth is crushing them slowly. They had you. They had access to the favor. They had a front row seat to the blessing, and they threw it away. The restaurant that wouldn't hire you? You just opened your own, and it's booked solid for the next 6 months. The bank that denied your loan. You just secured funding from investors who see your vision. The person who said you'd never find love. You're walking in a relationship so blessed it makes them question everything they thought they knew about happiness. But here's what they're really struggling with. It's not just that you succeeded, it's how you succeeded. With grace, with dignity, with a peace they can't manufacture, with a joy they can't fake, with a confidence they can't shake. You didn't climb over bodies to get where you are. You didn't step on others. You didn't compromise your values. You simply stayed faithful, and God opened doors that no human hand could shut. And now they're haunted by one terrifying question. What if they had said yes instead of no? What if they had embraced you instead of rejecting you? What if they had recognized the treasure standing right in front of them? But it's too late for what-ifs. The door they shut on you has now shut on them. And the key they threw away, God picked it up and used it to unlock your destiny. So here's my question for you, chosen one. Are you ready to stop looking back at the doors that rejected you and start walking through the ones that are calling your name? Chosen one, as we reach the end of this sacred moment together, I need you to remember 3 eternal truths that will anchor your soul in the storms ahead. First, your silence was never weakness. It was divine strategy. Every moment you chose restraint over retaliation, you were allowing heaven to build a case that no earthly court could overturn. Your tears weren't wasted, they were evidence. Your pain wasn't pointless, it was preparation. Second, the doors that rejected you weren't roadblocks, they were redirections. God was saving you from spaces too small for your destiny. He was protecting you from tables where you would have starved spiritually. He was steering you away from people who would have drained the very anointing He placed upon your life. And third, the karma visiting your enemies right now isn't your responsibility to orchestrate. You don't need to plot their downfall or celebrate their struggles. Your job is to keep walking in the light while they stumble in the darkness they created for themselves. But here's what I need you to understand. With every fiber of your being, you are not walking this path alone. The same God who collected every tear you cried in secret is the same God who is opening doors no man can shut. He sees you, He knows your name, and He's not finished writing your story, and neither are we. This community, this family of chosen ones watching right now, we see you too. We understand the weight you carry because we've carried it ourselves. We know the loneliness of being misunderstood because we've walked that valley. You have brothers and sisters around the world who are praying for your breakthrough, even when they don't know your name. So let me ask you this. If God has been faithful to protect you in the storm, don't you think He'll be faithful to promote you in the calm? If He guarded your heart through the betrayal, won't He guard your blessing through the elevation? Now, before you leave this sacred space, I want to pray over you. Not just words, but a declaration that penetrates the spiritual realm and touches the very throne of God. Closing prayer. Father God, I place my hand on the shoulder of every chosen one watching this message. Right now, in this moment, I speak peace over their restless nights. I speak clarity over their confused minds. I speak healing over their wounded hearts. Lord, You see the ones who've been rejected, overlooked, and cast aside. You see the ones who've cried themselves to sleep, wondering when justice would come. You see the ones who've been faithful in the darkness, trusting You, even when they couldn't trace You. I pray that You would open doors for them that no man can shut. I pray that You would elevate them to heights that would shock their enemies and astound their friends. Let their promotion be so undeniable that even their critics would have to acknowledge Your hand upon their lives. Give them supernatural peace that guards their hearts. Give them divine wisdom that guides their steps. Give them holy boldness that silences their fears. And Father, let them sleep tonight, knowing that their vindication isn't coming. It's already here. Protect them from the schemes of the enemy. Shield them from the attacks of the jealous. Cover them with Your favor like a warm blanket on a cold night. Let their light shine so bright that it becomes a beacon for other chosen ones who are still finding their way. And Lord, bless this community of believers who've gathered in this digital sanctuary. Let us be strength for each other, prayer warriors for each other, and living proof that Your chosen ones rise together. In the mighty name of Jesus, who conquered death so we could conquer life. Amen. Chosen one, if this message stirred something in your spirit, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs to know they're not forgotten. Drop a comment below and tell us what God spoke to your heart today. Ask us to pray for you, because we will. Share your testimony